On October 20th, 2025, at 2:48 in the morning, two automated systems inside Amazon's infrastructure tried to update the same record at the same time. One of them deleted every IP address for a critical database endpoint. The other one could not fix it. For the next 15 hours, 70,000 businesses waited. That is not a hack. That is not a cyber attack. That is a typo made by a machine, and it cost the businesses depending on Amazon's infrastructure $72 million per hour. Your data is fine until the day it is not. What cloud storage actually is starts with the promise. The pitch for cloud storage is simple, and it is genuinely compelling. Your files live on someone else's servers. You pay a monthly fee. You access them from anywhere. If your hard drive dies, your data survives. If your laptop gets stolen, your files are intact. Someone else handles the backups, the redundancy, the security. You stop worrying about hardware. That pitch is not wrong. The promise is real. Millions of businesses and billions of individuals depend on cloud infrastructure for exactly those reasons, and most of the time, it works. What the pitch does not say is what happens when it does not work. And what it absolutely does not say is that the companies selling you that peace of mind have spent decades structuring their services in ways that make you progressively more dependent, progressively harder to leave, and progressively more exposed to a single point of failure that you have no control over. The cloud is not a place. It is someone else's computer, and someone else's computer can go down. The concentration problem. Here's the number that makes the AWS outage make sense. According to Flexera's 2024 State of the Cloud report, 47% of enterprises run most of their workloads on AWS. Not some workloads, most workloads. Nearly half of global enterprise computing infrastructure is concentrated on a single provider inside a single ecosystem with a single dependency chain. When US-East-1 went down on October 20th, 2025, it did not take down one company. It took down the companies that host other companies. The cascading effect moved through the dependency chain in both directions. Services built on AWS failed. Services that those services powered also failed. The failure propagated through 3 layers of infrastructure before it reached the end user who just wanted to log in and do their job. 70,000 organizations, 6.5 million disruption reports globally, 1.4 million in the United States alone, and a single 15-hour window from a single bug in a DNS management system that 2 automated processes were writing to simultaneously. The former AWS vice president who ran their database division from 2014 to 2019 told CRN after the outage, "The question is not if, but when." He said that about the infrastructure he helped build. Expert aside, AWS operates its infrastructure across regions and availability zones. A region is a geographic cluster of data centers. An availability zone is an isolated fault domain within a region. The October 20th, 2025 outage affected US-East-1, AWS's oldest and largest region, also called Northern Virginia. AWS recommends multi-region architecture for critical workloads, specifically to prevent single-region failures from taking down entire systems. The businesses most affected by the outage were running workloads in a single region, often because multi-region architecture costs significantly more to build and operate. What you actually agreed to. Every major cloud provider publishes an SLA, a service level agreement. This is the document that defines what uptime they are promising you and what happens if they fail to deliver it. AWS's standard SLA for their core services promises 99.9% uptime. That sounds like a very high number. 99.9% uptime means your service can be down for 8 hours and 45 minutes per year before AWS is technically in breach of contract. The October 20th, 2025 outage lasted 15 hours. AWS was in breach of their annual SLA in a single event. Here's what the SLA entitles you to when that happens: a service credit, a discount on your next invoice. The standard AWS credit for an outage that brings you below 99.9% is 10% of your monthly fee for the affected service. For a business paying $10,000 per month for AWS infrastructure, a 15-hour outage resulting in $72 million in industry-wide losses entitles you to a $1,000 credit on your next bill. The gap between what the outage costs you and what the SLA compensates you for is not a bug in the contract, it is the contract. Expert aside, AWS SLA credits are calculated as a percentage of the monthly service charge for the affected service, not as compensation for business losses. The maximum standard credit for a complete service outage across most AWS services is 30% of the monthly fee. SLA credits are explicitly not intended to cover consequential damages, lost revenue, or business interruption. For businesses where downtime carries real financial consequences, cyber insurance specifically covering cloud dependency and business interruption is separate from and in addition to any SLA protections. The two are not the same product. The vendor lock-in mechanism. The SLA story would be easier to accept if leaving were simple. It is not simple, and the cloud providers have spent a significant amount of engineering effort making sure it is not simple. Vendor lock-in is not a conspiracy, it is a business model. The mechanism is straightforward. When you build on a cloud platform, you do not just store files, you build integrations. You use proprietary database formats. You deploy on container orchestration systems that are specific to that provider. You write code that calls APIs unique to that ecosystem. You train your team on tools that do not exist anywhere else. Moving off AWS is not a matter of copying files to a new server. It is a full infrastructure migration that typically takes 12 to 24 months, costs between 20 to 40% of annual cloud spend to execute, and requires specialized engineering talent that is in short supply. Gartner estimates that by 2027, over 50% of enterprises that attempt to migrate away from their primary cloud provider will not complete the migration. The companies that were most exposed in the October 2025 outage were not there because they made a bad decision. They were there because they made a good decision years ago that gradually became a structural dependency they could not exit without a multi-year project. That transition from good decision to structural dependency is not accidental, it is designed. Expert aside, the term for this in cloud architecture is egress cost. When you move data out of a cloud provider's ecosystem, you pay egress fees. AWS charges between 8 cents and 9 cents per gigabyte for data transferred out of their network. For a business with 100 terabytes of data in AWS, moving to a competitor costs between $8,000 and $9,000 in egress fees alone, before any engineering or migration costs. Cloudflare R2 and Backblaze B2 both offer zero egress fees specifically to compete with this dynamic. The major hyperscalers continue to charge egress because the cost creates a meaningful financial barrier to switching. The data sovereignty problem. Here's the dimension of cloud dependency that receives the least attention and carries the most long-term risk. When your data lives in someone else's infrastructure, it is subject to the legal jurisdiction of wherever that infrastructure physically sits. For most AWS workloads in the United States, that means US-East-1 in Northern Virginia. Your data is subject to US law, including the laws that allow certain government agencies, under certain circumstances, to request access to data stored in US-based infrastructure. The Cloud Act of 2018 extended U.S. government reach further. Under the Cloud Act, U.S. authorities can compel U.S.-based cloud providers to produce data stored on servers located in any country, not just within the United States. AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure are all U.S.-based companies subject to this authority. For a business operating in Europe, data stored in AWS's Frankfurt region is still stored in infrastructure operated by a U.S. company under U.S. legal jurisdiction. The GDPR compliance that AWS offers addresses data protection from a commercial perspective. It does not change the underlying jurisdictional reality. Most individual users will never encounter this dimension of the problem. Most small businesses will never encounter it either. but the exposure is structural and it is permanent for as long as your data lives in someone else's infrastructure under someone else's legal framework. Expert aside, the Cloud Act has been partially addressed through a series of bilateral data access agreements between the United States and other countries, including the UK. These agreements set conditions and oversight mechanisms for data requests. They do not eliminate the underlying jurisdictional exposure. Businesses in regulated industries, including healthcare, finance, and legal services that store sensitive data in US-based cloud infrastructure, what actually protects you? None of this means cloud storage is a bad choice. For most use cases, it remains the correct choice. The performance, reliability under normal conditions, and cost efficiency of major cloud providers are genuinely difficult to replicate independently. The argument is not to leave the cloud. The argument is to stop treating cloud storage as a complete solution when it is actually one layer of a solution. The 3-2-1 backup rule is the baseline that every IT professional knows and most individual users and small businesses ignore. 3 copies of your data, 2 different storage media, 1 copy off-site. Cloud storage counts as one of those copies, not all 3. Multi-region architecture is the enterprise version of the same principle. If your workload runs in a single AWS region, you have 1 copy of your infrastructure in 1 geographic location under 1 dependency chain. Multi-region deployment costs more. It costs less than a 15-hour outage at $72 million per hour. Provider diversification is the principle that the companies least affected by the October 2025 AWS outage had already implemented. They had workloads split between AWS and at least 1 competitor. When US-East-1 went down, they failed over. Their customers noticed nothing. Egress-free storage for backup tiers is the specific tactical decision that removes the financial barrier to diversification. Blaze 9 B2 and Cloudflare R2 charge no egress fees. Using either as a backup tier alongside AWS for primary storage eliminates the lock-in mechanism without requiring a full migration. Expert aside, AWS announced a reduction in egress fees in 2024 and as of 2025 offers free data transfer out to the internet for the first 100 gigabytes per month per account. This is a meaningful improvement for small-scale users. For enterprise workloads measured in terabytes, the fundamental egress cost structure remains in place. The reduction was widely interpreted as a competitive response to zero-egress alternatives rather than a structural change to the business model. Your data is fine. It will be fine tomorrow. It will probably be fine for years. The question is what happens on the day it is not, and whether you have a second copy somewhere that does not share the same dependency chain. That answer is not in your SLA. It is a decision you make before the outage, not after. Subscribe. Sudo Bit Logic is just getting started.